being called all kinds of names, that are fairly inappropriate, and how that can be kind of a fearful situation if you're stuck alone with this person, and you don't know what they're capable of doing. But in terms of what people are actually reporting, we don't have a mechanism to report it. We don't have a system to record it. The people that are doing the work on it are mostly the grassroots, are mostly people that are being affected by it, and we just don't have the resources to keep up the level of research that is necessary to document everything that is happening at this point in time. I think there was another part of your question that I might be missing out on. Was there another part that I missed? I touched on, you wanted to know what they were in for, you wanted to know more about the law enforcement violence against women, and then there was something else that I think you said.
Sí, sí, es la tipificación de los otros tipos de violencia, más allá de la violencia intrafamiliar, la violencia sexual de parte de la policía, el acoso sexual de parte de la policía.
Just other forms of violence and how they can be put into different forms of types.
Okay. It breaks down, I would say, you have interpersonal, you have community, and then you have law enforcement, right? So you have the domestic violence, you have sexual assault and rape, that 85% happens in the home anyway. And then with this breakdown, we have a lot of people who are living with other people that they may not necessarily have a tight family bond with, and that increases the chance of violence happening, the sexual violence happening in the home. And then what we also do have is law enforcement violence against women, different forms of targeting. I know that in one of the shelters there was a transgendered woman who was arrested for taking a shower in a women's facility. And just the ignorance around that gender dynamic can lead to potentially dangerous situations for people, for women, for transgender people. Also, women who appear a little bit more masculine tend to get roughed up a little bit more by the police when they do encounter them. Yeah.
Is there any more questions? Because we have another witness. Nothing. Okay. You have.
Je me souviens d'une parole qui vient des États-Unis d'Amérique, et la parole dit quand tu fais l'éducation d'une femme, d'un homme, tu éduques un individu. Quand tu fais l'éducation d'une femme, tu éduques toute une nation. Alors la question, c'est juste.
I remember a saying. I believe it comes from the United States. When you educate a woman, you educate the whole nation.
Yeah, et éduquer un homme, c'est éduquer un individu.
And when you educate a man, you educate an individual. When you educate a woman, you educate a nation.
Mais la question vraiment, c'est-à-dire que vous avez dit que dans les écoles publiques, les femmes représentaient 60% de la force de travail avant Katrina.
You said that in the public schools, women represented 60% of school teachers in the public schools, if I understand.
Alors, après Katrina, ces femmes ont-elles été remplacées par d'autres personnes, par d'autres travailleurs, ou alors les écoles publiques fermées?
What happened to these women who taught in public schools? Did they come back? Were they replaced? Have the public schools been shut down?
That's a complex question. I think a lot of women left, right? And you had to leave at first. So what happened was, the first few months after the storm is when they shut down the public schools, and then they broke the teachers union. I mean, it's back now, but it was pretty strong, and it was one of the largest unions in the state, which is traditionally anti-union. And so they shut them down, they restructured everything, and came up with a different public school structure, which is now a charter school system, and then you also have recovery schools, right? So we're having like a breakdown of centralized education, and different kids going to different schools are going to receive different levels of education. And then you also have, on top of that, this sort of I don't want to call them scabs, how do I put this? Like they're getting people from other places to come and be teachers here. And I mean, it's a lot of times that you'll have people that aren't necessarily experienced teachers, and they almost always go to the recovery school district, which is usually where you get the poor black kids, right? And so it's as blatant as what's happening. And so the people who had investment in the community, the people who cared, can't come back. And the people who are here right now, they don't necessarily have either the history or the same investment to do a good job.
Thank you.
And the resources are terrible. I mean, really, kids have to bring their own toilet paper. There was a point in time where there was one school that reported that they had more police officers than teachers. And so, and what does that say? And who does that target, you know?
Pronto. Bem, minha guerreira, uma saudação feminista para você.
Warrior, feminist greeting for you.
Eu teria 3 considerações. Primeiro, eu fiquei um pouco preocupada e gostaria que você explicasse que existe na sua fala, né, um certo silêncio com relação ao acidente Katrina. Seria das mulheres ou mulheres e homens por medo ou por marcas que foram deixadas pelo Katrina e que as pessoas não gostam de falar? A primeira pergunta.
The first question has to do, are there the psychological effects? Are there things that just people, even to this day, are not able or perhaps willing to talk about, and particularly women?
Yes. I would say that definitely there are things that people are still not able to talk about, unable to talk about. I would say that the stress levels are extremely high to the point where people, it's kind of killing people, what it's doing to their bodies, to their minds, to their souls. There are people who don't talk about what they went through. There aren't really places to go to talk about where you went through. There aren't people to call. There aren't enough trauma counselors. And so particularly women that are experiencing, you know, violence right now, I mean, it's kind of, where do you go? I mean, normal people don't have anywhere to go. So if you're in this particularly further marginalized place, what do you have to do, and how do you deal, and how do you cope when you're in the situation where you're unable to leave?
Eu vou fazer 2 que dá para você responder. Primeiro, como é que está a organização de mulheres aqui para esse movimento, onde o mundo está fazendo esforço de dar conhecimento, porque as coisas que estão sendo assim colocadas aqui nesse tribunal são questões que também perpassam a vida, né, do povo de outras diásporas. E aí eu gostaria de saber como é que está o movimento de mulheres, se integrou realmente na construção do Katrina, desse tribunal, isso é uma questão. E a outra também são questões que foram perguntadas no Brasil, é como ficou a situação, que apoio essas personalidades negras deram, os artistas, esse mundo da cultura, para esse grande momento, não é, de uma chamada de atenção ao mundo. Todo lugar que eu fui, o que o mais pessoal perguntou, cadê o nosso povo negro, os artistas, os grandes cantores, qual foi o apoio que eles deram realmente a esse momento? Muito obrigada.
The first question is, the state of the women's movement, has there been a reorganization of women organizing to defend women in this difficult condition? What is, has that been reorganized? Is it weak? Is it stronger? And the second question, has this movement received support of artists and prominent personalities, prominent women from around the country, around the world, to come to help women who are so in battle?
Well, I think in the movement, what we're seeing is that women are taking a lot of the leadership roles in terms of like the positioning that you see, and also being like providing for the backbone of it. In terms of like a women's movement, no, there hasn't really been a restructuring. There's been, you know, certain organizations that have pushed forward. I can't really speak on what has happened in past generations in terms of the visibility of women in struggle and that voice coming out to the forefront. But I feel that now there's, you know, and the movement is trying to at least get it out there and say that women are here and women are doing the work and women are affected by this as women. Famous people, not so much. Like famous artists, no. Unless I'm missing something. Not to my knowledge, really. Has Oprah showed up?
Is there any further questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
You told us earlier that 650 women prisoners were not evacuated. Were you making a point that there was a decision made not to evacuate women prisoners, but that male prisoners were evacuated? Or
No.
was it the general sense that many prisoners, male and female, were not evacuated?
None of the prisoners, male or female, were evacuated. The 650 was just to put out the number, and to just say, like, this is that, because I feel that a lot of times when people talk about prisoners, they think men only, right, young men, and putting it out there that there were women, they were affected. Some of them were teenagers, you know, and that that some of them did get put into a men's facility, and what that means, you know, to be put in something that's completely not even supposed to be for you. I was kind of just trying to speak to that experience, but they didn't evacuate anyone until days later.
Thank you.
At this time, we want to adjourn this section, and we're going to continue it tomorrow because there's one of the prosecutors who have to leave, and so we will pick up on the testimony about women tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just wanted to announce that we are going to proceed with the housing sector, and Tracie Washington is the attorney. Want this court to be mindful of the fact that she, as well as her witnesses, have to leave at 6 p.m. After the presentation on housing, we have scheduled basically cultural rights and environmental racism. We may have to withhold questions on those sectors, primarily because we have to conclude this session, this tribunal, today at... that session will happen tomorrow. Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, well, the cultural rights and the environmental racism will begin tomorrow at, sometime after 9 p.m., after we convene. For you? Absolutely, because I'm staying over an extra day, but I wasn't... Gotcha. All right, 9 a.m. The other piece of information that I need to share with you is that we will have to clear this room at 6:45. Because the building itself is going to shut down at 7 p.m. And anybody within this facility, if you leave at 6, you will not be able to return back into this facility. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Tracie Washington, who will deal with the housing sector.
Lily Mae. Where's Lily Mae? Okay.
I don't want to close anything down that people are using.
We're ready.
She's coming. Where are the witnesses being questioned?
Over here.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll call you up in just a second. Let me grab. One more piece of paper. Okay, and I'm actually short. I just had a piece of paper in front of me that I managed to misplace. God diggity. Thank you. Sometimes senility comes early. You have pieces of paper in front of you and you still can't find them. Good evening. I'm Tracie Washington. I am President and CEO of the Louisiana Justice Institute, and I wanted to talk with you today. And I am pleased to serve as prosecutor on the housing sector here. And forgive me if I get some of the procedures wrong, but I didn't have an opportunity to come a little bit earlier, and so I understand I'm allowed an opening. Okay, I understand I'm allowed an opening, and we will have one witness shorten the prosecution. I'll be presenting affidavit, some evidence by affidavit and bench books to you all tomorrow, so you'll have them. Lots of bench books from what I can see now. All right. When Hurricane Katrina made landfall in 2005, we understood here, even prior to any devastation, that we had housing problems here in the city of New Orleans. No one could lie to you or tell you otherwise. Age brings senility and bad eyes. Before Hurricane Katrina struck, the people of New Orleans faced significant barriers to housing opportunity, including a severe shortage of affordable housing, a low home ownership rate, problematic housing policies, and acute racial and economic segregation. Understanding that landscape and the decisions that it caused, we need to understand now more than ever what it is that it will take in the city of New Orleans to repair our housing problems. I think before we can talk about repairing our housing problems, however, we need to get a very, very clear understanding of what those problems were. Hurricane Katrina did not cause racial discrimination in housing. Hurricane Katrina put a spotlight on that, however. Hurricane Katrina did not cause inhumane problems in our public housing in New Orleans. It put a spotlight on those problems, however. Hurricane Katrina did not cause the redlining of housing in the city of New Orleans. But when the people of this nation saw that the devastation that was wrought in the city of New Orleans seems to have been concentrated in African American communities, Pontchartrain Park, Gentilly, and the Lower Ninth Ward, that's when folks really began to question, well, why is it that that's where all the black people live? And then we started questioning, what is it about housing policy? What is it about how our nation works when it comes to lending and housing discrimination that causes such concentrations of people of color in certain areas? Those are not just, United States policy issues, they are human rights issues. To the extent that we ever want to see a rebuilding of this community, we have to acknowledge the wrongs of the past and then decide that we are going to make repairs to those systems. Now, when you all are deliberating, you'll have the opportunity to read the affidavits of Dominique Diop, who is a senior policy advisor with PolicyLink. And in her affidavit, she was here to testify, but she had to leave to go back to Baton Rouge. You will hear from her about the disparities in renting and how Hurricane Katrina so disproportionately affected our renters in the city of New Orleans. 57% of the housing stock that was affected or destroyed was housing that was being rented. You will hear from Ms. Diop that those individuals who were renters received no in-hand money, and there's no allocation for those individuals so that they can return to the city of New Orleans. We provided, although individuals may not see it in hand, allocation through Community Development Block Grant dollars for homeowners. And there are requirements in federal law that provide for continued housing for public housing residents. But there's been no direct allocation for 57% of those individuals who were directly affected by Hurricane Katrina, and many of them are homeless. You will also hear briefly from her about the fact that there has been no real allocation and no plan for those individuals who need sustainable housing and those individuals who are disabled. We understand that there is a need for at least 15,000 accessible housing units for those individuals with physical disabilities. The state right now has planned for a little over 3,000 units. Ms. Diop will conclude by questioning what, as a nation, we do with those individuals who we have no plans for returning to the city of New Orleans. And I will proffer to you today that that is a human rights violation. The second affidavit that you will see, and will be able to read it, will be the affidavit of James Perry, who is the Executive Director of the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center. Mr. Perry will provide evidence to you concerning housing discrimination post-Hurricane Katrina. Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center did one study for rent unless you're black, and it documented the housing discrimination by landlords who, in no uncertain terms and in many instances, felt no shame in saying, we will rent to you, but not if you're black. And that spawned some litigation, including lawsuit against the St. Bernard Parish police jury or council, which passed an ordinance this past year that was called the Blood Ordinance, that provided homeowners in St. Bernard Parish, our neighboring parish, could rent their homes after they'd been remediated and remodeled, but they could rent only to blood relatives, which may sound fine unless you really understand that St. Bernard Parish is 90% white. So basically, you have excluded any African Americans from moving into rental housing in St. Bernard Parish because those landlords were prohibited from renting to well, I guess if you had an African American blood relative, which I guess all of us do, but we won't have that litigation here this year. So for our live testimony, I want to present to you Ms. Lily Mae Stokes. Ms. Stokes.
Test it first.
Ms. Stokes, would you tell the judges your name and your home address?
My name is Lily Mae Stokes. At the time of the storm, I was living at 1943 Flood Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, zip code 70117. Now I'm temporarily in Atlanta, Georgia, 1032 Faith Avenue, mailing address, zip code 30316.
All right, Ms. Stokes, I'm going to have you look at me for a second. I need to swear you in. Will you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give to the tribunal today is the truth?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Stokes, tell us your age.
I'm 67 years old.
How old were you when you moved to New Orleans, Mrs. Stokes?
I was a baby when I moved to New Orleans. I'm sorry. I was 13 years old when I moved to New Orleans.
And how long had you lived in, I understand you lived in the lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans, is that correct?
Yes.
How long had you lived in the lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans?
40 years.
40 years, since about early 60s?
Yes.
So were you in the lower Ninth Ward when Hurricane Betsy hit?
Yes.
Mrs. Stokes, are you married?
Yes, when my husband died 8 months before Katrina, and Katrina came and took everything that I had. We had our home. We had been married 6 years before we purchased our home in the lower Ninth Ward. I had my home 40 years. My husband and I had 5 children. And the reason why we bought the home, I like to state this. We wanted our children to have a home where the yard would be and where they could go out and play and have their own privacy.
Mrs. Stokes, how long had you lived at the 1943 Flood Street address?
40 years.
40 years. Where were you when Hurricane Katrina hit?
I was 1736 Canal Street at the Grand Hotel.
Tell me why you were at the Grand Hotel.
Because I heard on the news that this was going to be a Category 5 hurricane, and every day I would pass Florida Avenue, the North Claiborne Bridge, and I would look at the levees, and I just felt that those levees would not hold the water if a Category 5 comes through.
What made you think that the levees wouldn't hold that water?
Because every day I would see people working on there, and I saw them taking breaks, but it still had been 40 years since those pilers were there, and I just knew that it would not. I felt in my spirit that it would not hold the water.
Tell us a little bit about your house. We're going to talk some about your evacuation and things, but I want the judges to hear something more about your house. Tell us about your house.
Well, we purchased our house in 1966, and we paid cash for it at that time, $6,000. In 2004, I financed my house, and of course I had a $58,000 mortgage on my home, and I'm still paying that mortgage that we had just remodeled our home. My house was washed off of the blocks. There were 20 feet of water from Katrina, and I had some of the police officers told me that my house was still standing, even though 20 feet of water had passed. Then 2 weeks later, there was Rita. 10 feet of water passed. As you know, we didn't get any money. No money was funded for Rita.
All right. Bedroom and bathroom wise, how many bedrooms did you have?
I had 3 bedrooms, living room, dining room combination,
2 baths, and a garage.
All right. Now, Hurricane Katrina comes and you're at the hotel on Canal Street. When did you get any information about water coming into your house?
We checked into the Grand Hotel on the 28th, the 29th, which was a Monday. There, after the storm had passed through, there were no water on Canal Street. I had my car parked in the overhead garage. I went down about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, got my car down, and my mother was 85 years old at the time of the storm, and she's here. And we were going to go home, and then some of the people, families was in the Grand Hotel. We were discussing about, well, maybe some waves may come later. I think we need to stay here another night. There were no water on Canal Street. But when I woke up on Tuesday morning, I looked across Canal Street and my car was covered with water. And then the people started saying that the lower ninth ward is covered. The lower ninth ward is full of water. They said that some people's cell phones were still working. And one of the ladies who's still in Texas, she haven't came back. And we lived on Flood Street together. She came to my room and she said, our house is covered with water. And I couldn't believe that it had taken over like that. And then somebody had a little radio, battery radio that was working because the lights had went out in the Grand Hotel, the toilets had stopped up, there was no water. And I could hear our mayor calling for people to come with boats from various parishes. He said 80% of the city is covered with water. And he said, anybody have boats, please come help me. He said it was supposed to be 40,000 people from FEMA. I learned last night, he said, please forgive me. I learned last night at a news conference that this city would not hold the water that the Category 5 would bring in. He said, but FEMA said, assured me that there would be 40,000 people coming to the city to help evacuate the people. And there is nobody. So he was calling people from Jefferson all over to come and help him evacuate the people. In that hotel where there were people, hundreds of people in the hotel. We were on the 6th floor. The water came up on the 5th floor. By Wednesday, we were still there now. We had Monday, no water. Tuesday, there was water. Car was covered. Then on Wednesday morning, nobody had came. There was a lady who had a baby in the hotel. And we kept flagging we kept raising out white sheets and white T-shirts. The men will pull them off. And they said, asking the National Guard to please come because there's a woman here that had a baby. And so finally, the National Guards came in and they took her away. The hotel where we were, they had people who was on dialysis, people who had the oxygen tents, people who had cancer, people who were wearing Pampers and everything and ran out. Then we were about to run out of food. And there were people united together. They said it was crime. But if it was crime, gangs used their expertise to evacuate the people because nobody never came to the Grand Hotel and evacuated us. We had people in the Grand Hotel. One family had 16 people in that family. And my mother was in there. We were praying. And I said, it's just my mother and I. What we're going to do, they said, we're going to take you all. We're going to make sure that you're going to get out. The next morning, the young people went out. And we don't know whose boat it was, but it was somebody else's boat. But they went out there and got it. And they used their expertise to come back. They made 15 trips. They put 6 people on the boat. These were young women, young men, teenagers. So they say they know how their daddy used to fish. Well, their daddy was deceased, and they know how their daddy used to use those boats to fish, and their mother was telling them what to do, and we're not going to run into a car. Be extremely careful. They picked my mother up like a baby. They picked me up like a baby. Even though that somebody snatched my pocketbook when I got on the boat, they asked me, did I want to go back in the hotel and get it? I said, no, I don't want to do like Lot's wife. Trying to appeal a sign, looking back.
I'm sorry, Ms. Stokes, I'm sorry, I can't see you, so I couldn't talk. And no, we didn't want you to turn like Lot's wife. We were just glad that you got out of that hotel. We're thankful that you were able to get out of the hotel. I got a tap on my shoulder, so I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about your housing loss before they have to shut me down.
Okay.
I want everybody who's here, and I want the judges in particular, to know what has happened to your house claim. And we're going to give you these pictures. What happened to your house claim, and so let's start with that. Did you have insurance on your home?
No, I had homeowners insurance, but I didn't have flood insurance because we were told, my husband and I, when we bought the insurance, we had the insurance since 1966, that it was not a flood zone since a storm hadn't been in 40 years when we renewed the insurance in 2004. When I refinanced the house, the Noble Star Mortgage did not say, they said we did not need flood insurance.
So
that's why I still owe them.
And so you had no flood insurance on your house, just the homeowner's insurance, correct?
Homeowners, yes.
So would I be correct, and would the judges be correct in understanding that you got no payment on your homeowner's insurance from, tell me the name of the insurance company again?
LA Citizen.
Citizen.
Allstate and LA Citizen is a parenting, Allstate is a parenting to LA Citizen. And I only got $17,000.
$17,000 from LA Citizens and Allstate.
Yes.
And to your best estimate, how much would it cost to replace your home?
Well, I've been talking to carpenters since I've been here in New Orleans. One told me $125,000. One said $150,000. And Road to Home is not going to give me that much money.
Tell us a little bit about Road Home, because that's where we were headed.
I'm still waiting on Road Home. I'm in closing, but I'm still waiting.
How long ago was it that you applied for your Road Home grant?
I applied for my Road Home grant since September the 7th of 2006.
And it is
I went in 2007, February the 9th was when they called me for my second time to go.
So it took you 6 months before the state of Louisiana called you after you made application with the Road Home?
Yes.
And you say you're in closing now. Would you mind sharing with the jurors and with the judges how much it is that Road Home is awarding you?
They said that I'm not going to get but $70,000. And, they said I'm going to get $70,000. I'm in the lower ninth ward, so you have to raise your house. There was supposed to be money allocated to raise your house, which would give you another $30,000. Okay? The money was supposed to be there since July 1st. I spoke with them on yesterday. The money is still not there. The $30,000 that it takes to go along with the $70,000 and to raise your home, and they don't know when they're going to get it. They're about to run out of money.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's going to be like 60-some thousand people who are not going to be able to get their Road Home money unless they go back to the federal government and ask for money.
Mrs. Stokes, there is a formula that's been used by the state for determining how much money people are going to get with Road Home. And it is my understanding that and I need you to tell me, are they deducting any money from your grant for you not having flood insurance on your home?
Yes. According to, now, by my age, keeps them from penalizing, the 30% penalizing me. But monies that FEMA had given me for me to live off of during after the storm, all of that is being deducted from there. The insurance money that was given to me, the $17,000, is going to be deducted from there.
So the judges need to understand that $70,000 isn't what you're going to get at closing, is it?
No, that's not what I'm going to get at closing.
So with that balance of approximately, am I correct, somewhere around $50,000 or less, will you be able to rebuild your home in the lower Ninth Ward at that property address, 1943 Flood Street?
No, I won't.
And in your assessment, do you believe someone now at age 67, you'll be able to get a 30-year mortgage to rebuild a house at 1943 Flood Street?
Well, they're not supposed to discriminate against age, but they certainly will check your credit, and if your credit is not 744, I met with someone this morning and said if your credit is not 744, you can be denied a loan. But the mortgage company have the last say-so. So people feel like age has something to do with it, but people are living longer now than they did in the past years.
Judges, I know I'm running close to being out of time, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then I want Mrs. Stokes to talk with you without Sex in the City. Somewhere in there, there's the phone. Then I want her to show you some of the photographs of her house. Mrs. Stokes, you are going to end up with somewhere in the neighborhood of $45,000 to $50,000. You're living in Atlanta right now. Tell the judges, what is it that you think you can do with that money, and what is it that you want? What do you want the government to do for you?
I want the government to build my house back debt-free so I won't have to pay a bill. I worked 35 years for the state of Louisiana. I worked for the LSU Ag Center. 2005, I had to retire because of Katrina. I'm not the cause of the levee breakage. I didn't have anything to do with the levee breakage. And so since that happened, I think that the state of Louisiana, our government, Bush, should be able to allocate enough money for me to get back in my home.
Around. Okay, all right, wait, hold on. We got one more question. All right, we got one more question before we get to these pictures. And I apologize to you because Mrs. Stokes did tell me specifically she wanted to give a few words about her mother. The floor is yours. You wanted to tell them about your mother.
At the time of the storm, my mother was 85 years old. My dad was evacuated to Roswell and Georgia, and he's in the nursing home. He was talking and doing he was in the nursing home at Covington House, but he was talking and walking around. He's had a stroke since then, and I have to go see him every other day. Now I don't have a car. My car is broke, so I have to take the minibus, and that's 45 miles going, 45 miles coming back. And my car was lost in the flood, and I want the government to give me a new car.
Mrs. Stokes, I'm going to show you a couple photographs. I want you to identify them, and we're going to have copies of the photographs placed into evidence. Most of these are photographs of the house. Identify this photograph for the judges.
This photograph was taken one day. I came from church before Katrina, and I was a happy family then. My husband was living, and of course we had 2 cedar trees in there, and you know how valuable the cedar trees, but they came up right with the stone.
This is going to be, I'm sorry, I'm going to identify these photographs as P1, P2, and then going on. This was P1.
This is my house washed. It was sitting here. It washed off the block, and into the neighbor's house. You can't see the neighbor's house right there. Pass them down so they can see them.
Mrs. Stokes, I'm going to show you a photograph that we're going to mark as P3.
This is the house, and this is the neighbor's house. This is the front part of the house. After this disaster with Katrina.
I'm showing Mrs. Stokes what's going to be marked as P4.
This is the day that they broke my heart. I went to the 9th Ward, which was August the 12th of 2006. They bulldozed my house down. And it was a hurting thing. I tell you, as never to stand up and see all you have for 40 years is gone. I wasn't even able to get back into my house to get anything out of there because by the time I got there in November, everything was too rotten. And here's the bulldozers there. They're taking